Waitress with sick child receives a tip from Neymar that changes everything. How will this story escalate? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. Camila adjusted the strap of her apron, exhaling deeply before stepping out onto the restaurant floor. It was a busy Friday evening, the kind that made her stomach twist with both relief and anxiety. Relief because more customers meant bigger tips, maybe enough to cover the overdue hospital bill for Sophia. Anxiety because exhaustion already clawed at her limbs, and she still had 6 more hours to go before she could even think about resting. Her black sneakers, worn from years of long shifts, scuffed against the tiled floor as she weaved between tables. The hum of conversation mixed with the clinking of glasses and the occasional burst of laughter from a lively group near the bar. The scent of sizzling steak and garlic butter filled the air, momentarily making her forget the gnawing worry in the back of her mind. Table 7 needs their check, called Daniel, her coworker, as he rushed past with a tray of drinks balanced effortlessly on one hand. Camila nodded, grabbing the leather checkbook from the counter and making her way toward the booth. Her heart clenched when she saw the time on her wristwatch, 8:17 p.m. Sophia's fever had been high when she left home, and though she had begged her neighbor, Anna, to keep an eye on her, she couldn't shake the guilt of not being there. The diner at table 7 barely glanced at her as she placed the check down. He was an older man, dressed in a crisp suit, scrolling through his phone with an air of disinterest. She gave him a polite smile before stepping back, already scanning the restaurant for where she was needed next. Then, she saw him, a man in a navy blue tracksuit with neon green stripes down the sleeves, sitting alone at a booth in the corner. His hoodie was pulled back slightly, revealing short, curly hair and a fade on the sides. His strong jawline and familiar features sent a flicker of recognition through her, but she quickly dismissed the thought. Customers came in all the time, some famous, some just resembling celebrities. It wasn't her place to assume. She grabbed her notepad and approached the table, forcing her lips into a practiced smile. "Good evening. Welcome. Can I get you started with something to drink?" The man looked up from his menu, his dark eyes warm but unreadable. "Water's fine. And maybe some recommendations?" His voice was deep but casual, the kind that carried a quiet confidence. She nodded, listing off the house specials. "Our ribeye is popular, and if you're looking for something lighter, the grilled salmon is a good choice." He nodded, tapping a finger against the menu. "I'll take the ribeye medium rare, and some fries on the side." "Excellent choice." She scribbled the order down. "I'll get that right in." Before she turned, he added, "By the way, you seem tired." Her breath hitched for a second. It was such an unexpected comment. Polite, but direct. Her exhaustion wasn't something customers usually noticed, much less pointed out. She forced another smile. "It's been a long day." He nodded, watching her for a beat longer than necessary before returning to his menu. She walked away quickly, shaking off the odd sensation in her chest. As she reached the counter to put in his order, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Panic flared as she yanked it out, shielding the screen behind the counter. Anna's name flashed across the screen. Her stomach twisted. She hit accept and whispered, "Hello?" "Camila," Anna's voice was low, concerned. "Sophia's temperature isn't going down. She's been coughing non-stop." Camila squeezed her eyes shut, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles ached. "Did you give her the medicine?" "Yes, but it's not helping. She's burning up." For a second, the restaurant noise around her faded. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat, pounding against her ribs. "I'll try to leave early," she said, though she knew it wasn't likely. Her boss, Arturo, had already warned her about missing too many shifts. "I can stay with her, but I think she might need a doctor," Anna said gently. A doctor. A hospital visit meant another bill. Money she didn't have. "I'll figure something out," Camila promised, though she had no idea how. She ended the call just as Arturo stepped out from the kitchen. His sharp gaze locked onto her immediately. "No phones during shifts," he reminded her, voice clipped. "Not interested in excuses." Table 5 just sat down, Get to it. Her jaw clenched, but she swallowed the retort, burning her tongue. Arguing wouldn't help. She needed this job, no matter how much it chipped away at her soul. She stuffed her phone back into her pocket, plastering a new, forced smile onto her face before heading toward table 5. As the night dragged on, Camila found herself returning to the man in the tracksuit's table more than necessary. Maybe it was because he was one of the only polite customers that night. Maybe it was because his presence felt oddly grounding amidst her inner chaos. Or maybe it was just because he was watching her, not in a creepy way, but in a way that made her feel seen. By the time his food arrived, the restaurant had quieted slightly. "You from around here?" he asked casually as she placed the plate in front of him. Camila hesitated. Personal questions weren't uncommon, but something about this man's interest felt different. "Yeah," she said simply. "You always work late shifts?" She let out a soft, humorless chuckle. "Lately, yeah." He studied her for a second, then nodded. "Well, food smells great. Thanks." She nodded back, stepping away before the conversation could stretch further. Minutes passed. The businessman at the next table snapped his fingers at her, clearly annoyed. "You forgot the extra sauce," he said, his tone dismissive. She blinked. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I'll get that for you right away," he scoffed. This place is a mess tonight. Something inside her cracked, but she swallowed it down. Neymar, though she still didn't recognize him as Neymar, glanced up from his plate, watching the exchange. He said nothing, but his jaw tightened slightly. Camila rushed to the kitchen, grabbing the sauce, forcing herself to keep moving. Every second that ticked by felt heavier. Then, just as she was turning back to the dining area, her phone buzzed again. Another call, another wave of panic. She knew it was Anna before she even looked. And somehow, she knew before answering. Things had just gotten worse. Camila's fingers trembled as she answered the call. Anna's voice was urgent. Hushed. "She's getting worse, Camila. She's crying in her sleep, burning up. I think you need to take her in." Her breath caught in her throat. Words failed her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run out of the restaurant and never look back. But she couldn't. She had a job to finish, paycheck to earn. A boss who wouldn't care that her daughter was sick if it meant an empty table in the middle of rush hour. "I have one more hour," she whispered. "One more." Anna hesitated. "Okay, but hurry." Camila ended the call and forced herself to move. The moment she stepped back onto the floor, it felt like the weight of the world was pressing against her shoulders. She kept her head down, pushing through, delivering orders, refilling drinks, dodging impatient sighs and judgmental stares from customers who saw her as nothing more than someone to serve them. Her fingers ached from gripping trays too tightly. Her back throbbed from bending over tables, forcing herself to smile when all she wanted to do was fall apart. She kept moving, because if she stopped, she'd crumble. And she couldn't afford to crumble. At table 8, Neymar, though she still didn't know it was him, ate slowly, watching her. He had seen tired workers before, exhausted single parents, struggling mothers. But something about Camila felt different. She wasn't just tired. She was drowning, and no one around her seemed to care. She brought him his check with a small, strained smile. "Everything okay?" he asked again, this time softer. She hesitated before nodding. "Yes, just a long night." He didn't buy it, but he didn't push. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. She blinked. "Sir, your total is—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "This is for you." She looked at the envelope, confused. It wasn't a credit card or cash. It was thick, heavy. I can't accept." "You can." He slid it across the table. "I insist." For a moment, she just stared at him. There was no smugness in his expression, no arrogance, just quiet certainty. She swallowed hard, fingers hesitating before finally picking it up. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure of what else to say. He simply nodded. Then he stood, stretched his arms, and left. Just like that. No grand gesture. No expectation of thanks. Gone. Camila stood frozen for a moment, the envelope in her hands feeling heavier than it should. She was about to slip it into her apron pocket when Daniel passed by, nudging her. "Yo, do you even realize who that was?" She frowned. "What?" Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "That was Neymar." Her stomach flipped. "What? The footballer. The guy worth millions. You didn't recognize him?" Camila stared at the door where he had disappeared, mind blank. No, she hadn't recognized him. She had been too busy surviving to notice. Her fingers tightened around the envelope, and suddenly her world tilted. Camila stepped into the alley behind the restaurant, away from the noise and the customers, before tearing open the envelope with shaking hands. And then she saw it. Stacks of crisp $100 bills. Her breath hitched. She flipped through them, counting, barely able to process the number. $10,000. Her heart stopped. Her body went numb. Her knees nearly buckled. She gripped the brick wall behind her for support, her breath coming in short, desperate bursts. $10,000. Enough to cover Sophia's hospital bill. Enough to buy her more time. Enough to give her hope. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears burning in her eyes. Her phone buzzed again. "Anna." Her fingers fumbled as she answered. "Anna? She's really bad, Camila," Anna said quickly. "She needs a doctor now." Camila didn't hesitate. "I'm coming." She didn't even clock out. She didn't tell Arturo. She just ran. By the time she arrived at the hospital, Sophia was burning up, tiny beads of sweat dotting her forehead. A nurse led them inside, asking questions. How long had the fever been this high? Had she been eating? Drinking? Camila answered as best as she could, voice shaking, hands trembling. The doctor examined her quickly, concern flashing in his eyes. "She needs treatment immediately," he said. "We'll start her on fluids and monitor her closely. But we'll also need to run tests, which meant more bills, which meant more money she didn't have. Except now she did." She reached into her bag, fingers still trembling, and pulled out the cash. "All of it," she said, placing it on the desk. "Please, do whatever she needs." The doctor blinked, then nodded. And just like that, Sophia was taken into care. Camila sat in the waiting room, her body sagging into the chair, finally able to breathe. For the first time in months, she wasn't trapped. For the first time in months, there was a way out. And it was because of a man she hadn't even recognized. Hours passed. Camila dozed off in the chair, exhaustion finally winning over. When she woke, it was to the sound of soft footsteps. She blinked, disoriented, before realizing Sophia was standing in front of her. Not crying, not feverish, just standing, looking better. "Mommy?" Sophia's voice was small, tired, but clear. Camila surged forward, wrapping her arms around her daughter as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're okay." Sophia just nodded sleepily against her shoulder. Camila pulled back, brushing damp curls from her forehead. "Guess what, baby?" she murmured, voice thick with emotion. "Someone gave us a miracle today." Sophia blinked up at her, half asleep. "A magic one?" Camila laughed, choked and broken, but real. "Yeah," she whispered, "a magic one." Camila sat by Sophia's hospital bed, her fingers gently brushing against her daughter's soft curls. The 4 drip beside them beeped rhythmically, a sound that once sent panic through her veins but now felt strangely comforting. It meant Sophia was stable. She was getting what she needed. For the first time in months, Camila wasn't consumed by dread. She was still exhausted, still processing everything that had happened, but the weight on her chest had finally lifted, even if just a little. Sophia stirred, blinking sleepily before looking up at her mother with big, curious eyes. "Mommy?" her tiny voice croaked. "Yes, baby?" Camila whispered, smoothing the damp curls from her forehead. "Are we going home now?" Tears pricked at the corners of Camila's eyes. "Soon." "Not yet, sweetheart. But soon," she promised. "The doctors are making sure you're all better first." Sophia pouted, rubbing her eyes. "I don't like hospitals." Camila chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Me neither. A gentle knock at the door pulled Camila from the moment. She turned to see a nurse stepping inside, a kind smile on her face. "We're finishing up Sophia's paperwork," the nurse said. "She'll be ready for discharge tomorrow morning." The doctor is pleased with how she's responding to the treatment. Camila exhaled deeply, the relief washing over her like a wave. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. The nurse nodded, pausing before adding, "The cash you left was more than enough to cover the hospital bill. Would you like us to return the extra amount?" Camila blinked. The extra amount? She had barely counted in the moment, overwhelmed by the sheer generosity of it all. But now she realized there had been more than enough, more than she needed. She could breathe. For once, she didn't have to choose between rent and medicine, between food and hospital bills, between surviving and breaking. She could finally just be. "Yes, please," she murmured, feeling the burn of fresh tears. That would be good." The next morning, after final checkups and signatures, Camila carried Sophia out of the hospital, holding her close. The morning sun was warm against her face, chasing away the cold memories of last night. She strapped Sophia into the back seat of Anna's car, her best friend insisting on picking them up from the hospital. "You look like you've been hit by a truck," Anna teased, nudging her arm as she pulled onto the main road. Camila laughed, really laughed, for the first time in a long time. "Feels like it too." They drove in comfortable silence for a while before Anna spoke again, more gently this time. "You got lucky, Camila." Camila turned, looking at her friend's face. "Yeah, I did." Anna shook her head, smiling. "No, I mean, you deserve this. You've been fighting so hard. Maybe the universe finally decided to give you a break." Camila swallowed the lump in her throat. Maybe, or maybe some people were just good. Maybe kindness, real kindness, still existed. And it had come from a stranger she hadn't even recognized. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Camila sat at the small kitchen table with the envelope still in her hands. She traced her fingers over the edges, still unable to believe it was real. A part of her wanted to let it go, to just move forward quietly. But another part of her knew people deserved to know. She picked up her phone, opened her social media app, and started typing. "I don't know if he'll ever see this, but I have to say it anyway. Last night, my daughter was sick, really sick, and I didn't have enough money to get her the treatment she needed. I was working my shift at the restaurant, trying to hold it together, when a man I didn't even recognize left me an envelope. Inside was $10,000. That man was Neymar. I didn't ask for help. I didn't expect it, but he gave it anyway, without fanfare, without expecting anything in return. Because of him, my daughter is home. Because of him, I didn't have to make the impossible choice between my job and her life. So if you ever see this, Neymar, thank you. From the bottom of my heart. You changed everything." She hesitated before hitting post. Would he see it? Probably not. But maybe that didn't matter. Maybe just saying thank you was enough. She pressed send and went to bed. By morning, her phone had exploded. Hundreds of notifications, thousands, comments, messages, articles. Her story had gone viral. News outlets were picking it up. People were sharing it worldwide. Strangers were sending her messages. Mothers who had been in the same position. Workers who understood her struggle. Fans praising Neymar for his quiet generosity. And then, a notification stopped her cold. Comment. From him. "You didn't need luck, Camila. You just needed a little help. Wishing you and Sophia all the best." Her heart stopped. He saw it. He knew. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the screen, shaking her head in disbelief. Sophia toddled into the room, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Mommy?" Camila turned, scooping her up into her arms, pressing a soft kiss to her cheek. "Yes, baby?" Sophia yawned. "What's wrong?" Camila smiled, hugging her close. "Nothing, sweetheart." She closed her eyes, breathing in her daughter's warmth. Nothing at all. Over the next few days, Camila's world changed. She had never experienced anything like this. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from strangers, news agencies, and even local reporters wanting to interview her. People she had never met before were offering support, donations, and words of encouragement. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about kindness, about what one simple act could do for someone drowning. She didn't know how to process it all. The restaurant had called, asking when she was coming back to work. She hadn't answered yet. For the first time in years, she had the luxury of choice. The freedom to take a breath without worrying about what bill she had to pay next. She still had to be careful. She wasn't rich, but she wasn't desperate anymore. That alone was life-changing. One evening, a knock came at her door. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, confused. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened it, Anna stood there holding up her phone with a giant grin. "Guess who's in town?" Camila raised an eyebrow. "What?" Anna turned the screen toward her. There, on social media, was a picture of Neymar at the airport, arriving for a match in their city. Camila's heart skipped a beat. "He's here," Anna smirked. "And guess what? The news is saying he saw your post." "What if?" "No," Camila laughed, shaking her head. "No way. He's a superstar. He has bigger things to worry about than me." Anna shrugged, but her eyes sparkled with mischief. "You never know." Camila didn't think much of it. She had enough on her plate. Doctors' follow-ups for Sophia, figuring out what came next. But that weekend, something happened that she never saw coming. Sophia was napping when Camila's phone rang. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to pick up. "Hello!" A deep, familiar voice came through the speaker. "Camila!" She froze, because she knew that voice. Her breath caught in her throat. "Yes, this is Neymar." She couldn't speak. For a solid 5 seconds, her brain refused to process reality. I wanted to check in," he continued. "I saw your post. I'm really happy Sophia is doing better." Camila sank into a chair, pressing a hand to her mouth. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." His tone was warm, easy. "I just wanted to make sure you and your daughter were okay." Tears welled in her eyes. She thought she had cried enough in the past few days. Apparently not. "We are," she whispered. "Because of you." A chuckle. "Nah, because of you. I just gave you a little push." Camila laughed softly, blinking back tears. She wanted to say more, to thank him again. But she knew he hadn't done this for attention. He had done it because he cared. And somehow that made it even more meaningful. The call was short, simple, but it was something she would never forget. The next day, she turned in her notice at the restaurant. She didn't know what she was going to do next. But for the first time in a long, long time, she had options. She had hope, and sometimes hope was everything. Sophia snuggled into her lap that evening, her little fingers playing with the ends of Camila's hair. "Mommy?" "Yes, baby?" Sophia yawned. "Can we say thank you to the magic man?" Camila smiled, pressing a kiss to her daughter's head. "We already did, sweetheart." She looked out the window at the city lights, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. "But maybe someday we can say it in person. Kindness doesn't have to be loud to change a life. Sometimes, it's a simple act that gives someone the hope they needed to keep going. Be that hope for someone today."